now that it is on the hour. Welcome again to 2019's first Technology Tuesday webinar, which is hosted by the Technology and Innovation Professional section, which is a community of the American Public Gardens Association. My name is Gavin Culbertson. I'm with the IT team here in snowy Denver, and I am the vice chair of the TIPS community, along with Eddie Dawson, who is our chair. And today we'll be hosting our first webinar. So a little bit about our community. We try to engage all levels of garden staff involved with technology, and many in the community are people who become accidental IT administrators, or they're people who've been longtime IT workers on things and technicians. And so we're trying to really pull together our community and provide services like webinars that can be useful for sharing knowledge across our community. We also really make reviews and recommendations on best practices on things that we come across, and tech is really somewhat primordial at gardens in comparison to other museums. So we try to link ourselves to a greater community of museum technologists and trends and bring that to everyone in the community. And also these learning opportunities like webinars and workshops and symposiums, we think are one of the most valuable things we can provide to the community. And so I'd like to introduce our person who's putting together these webinars, Chris Clement, who is on the call as well listening today. He's the Senior Systems Admin and IT Security Manager at Longwood Gardens. And he is in the TIPS leadership role is a professional development leader. So he'll be focusing on identifying topics and features for webinars. So he would be the one to reach out to if you have other ideas to share. Again, we have lots of opportunities. Webinars, we try to do one every season or so. We usually skip the summer area because around the conference when we're doing workshops and things. But if you have an idea for a webinar, feel free to reach out on the discussion board on the APGA website and look for Chris Clement, who will be helping you figure out how we work on our learning opportunities. And today I'd like to introduce Rowan Blaik, who's going to be presenting today. He is the Director of Living Collections at Brooklyn Botanic Garden, and he holds a Master of Research in Spatial Analysis from University College London and a Diploma in Horticulture from Kew. He specializes in historic botanic gardens and was previously head gardener at Down House, the home of Charles Darwin. And today's topic is custom data capture with the iOS Shortcuts app. So, Rowan, with that, take it away.
Yep, great. Okay. So thanks, everyone. Thanks for the introduction. I'm going to talk for around 35 minutes, and there'll be some time for questions at the end. I'm going to talk to you about making custom data capture shortcuts using the Shortcuts app on iOS. So a bit about what shortcuts are. Right, so what are shortcuts? So they are small modular macros that can pass information between one another, and there's a very, very low learning curve to getting them running, and they can be written up on an iOS device and run on the device as well. So they're easy to make and edit and to share and to use on the device. They work on any iOS device, so in theory that could be everything from an Apple Watch through to an iPod or an iPad, iPhone, and they have been in existence for a few years now. First of all, as an app called Workflow from iOS 9 and upwards, and now that company got bought out by Apple, and it's now called Shortcuts, and it has the benefit now of being synchronized across all devices and access to the cloud and the like. So once written, these shortcuts can be run as widgets. They can be triggered by a Siri command. They can be an icon on the home screen, or they can be scheduled. So at a certain time, a prompt pops up and says, do you want to run this? Or geofence. So when you go somewhere and the phone's GPS picks up you're in a location, it will run. Again, it will pop up and say, would you like to run this shortcut? And I guess the most useful thing about shortcuts is that when you add other apps that are compatible with shortcuts, they often add functionality into the Shortcuts app itself. So, for example, if you have Skype installed on your iPhone, then some options will pop up within Shortcuts, specifically to do with Skype. So I mentioned in the text there that it was kind of seems to be based on this kid's programming language called Scratch. So you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see how there are a number of commands that are stacked together almost like Lego bricks, and they slot one into the other, and they're color-coded so that it's very easy for kids to see, yeah, this one's compatible with that, and I can slot them together and make something happen. So this is what it looks like when you first open up Shortcuts. You'll get a nice welcome screen, and it will suggest some shortcuts to you that you might want to build up in a library. And it also means that you get an opportunity to have some that have already been written for you, and then you can delve into those, see how they work, and get inspired, but also see how they're actually working for you. So this is the gallery view. You'll select some that you want to add into your library. This is the library view on an iPad. And you'll see that there are a number of ones that are provided. So for example, make an animated GIF, remind me about something when I get home, what time do I need to leave by? And so these are the kind of built-in ones that will kind of get you started, and then you can add in more and more into the library. So first of all, I'm going to show you one of the built-in examples, how that works. So I mentioned the make GIF. Now, if I was to tap on the iPad within this, it would actually run the shortcut. But there's a little ... the ellipses in the top corner. If you tap on that button, it opens it up in an editor view. And within the edit view, there are several things going on. The most important of which I find is the search box, because gradually as the shortcuts, workflow and shortcuts apps have been developed, more and more functions or actions have been added in. And so often, you can be scrolling through thinking, what exactly do I need for this particular task? And by far the quickest way is to tap into the search box, and it will filter them down for you. So you've got your palette of actions here on the left-hand side. Because the example I'm looking at makes an animated GIF, so the little looping animations you often see on the internet, that has put mainly image-based examples in the actions list on the left-hand side. So that will change and adapt and show different actions as you work your way through. So the next part is actually where the kind of building blocks, the actions, get stacked up. And when they run in a linear order from the top down to the bottom, and they can be dragged to rearrange, they can be deleted, and the order that you add them in is significant, that you drop them into. And one other concept is these connectors. So you can see that these action blocks are connected to one another by these short lines. And so what happens with those is if the output from one module is acceptable as an input into the next one, then it will join them together. And you may not always want that, so that's just something to be aware of. So for example, when we take a photo, it's then passed to the next step, which is to make it into a GIF, and then the next step to show it on screen, and then the next step to show the total of all of that as a message. And then we have some controls to play, to undo and redo, to share your shortcut that you've created, and to change some settings on it. Okay, so why did I start to have a play around with these at Brooklyn Botanic Garden? So we have quite a lot of Apple devices, and up until this point, you're very reliant on a third-party app if you want to do data capture, because with iOS, there's very few options in creating your own apps, other than to go the route of a kind of fully blown development route, which we want the advantages of, but we don't want to kind of invest all of the time and effort into developing full-blown apps. So when I became aware about shortcuts and what you could do with it, I thought, well, that's great. So we could actually program very small things that will do very specific things for us, and give those a test. So yeah, to test the Shortcuts app for customizable data capture. So thinking about things like inventorying, doing an inventory of plant collections. So could we call up existing records, capture an image of a plant, get some GPS coordinates, put all of that into a spreadsheet file, and kind of tag up any images at the same time. Now, I found that with best intentions, we'd go out to do an inventory. It would be maybe a clipboard and paper and pencil. We've always got devices with us, but just would we capture locations with the GPS, and would we capture images at the same time? And I find that if you've got a kind of workflow where you're jumping between a paper copy and a camera and what have you, things get missed, and generally you don't end up with a very comprehensive lot of data afterwards. Another example would be, when we had new plant acquisitions coming in, if we had a large landscaping scheme with lots of material coming in, we would not kind of consistently take photographs of the plant material, so that we could associate a record with an actual plant group of plants. And also the other thing to try out is that we're gradually becoming more and more digital with how we deal with plant records. So we are trying to kind of have a cradle to grave digital process, so that we're capturing information about a plant in the database or alongside the database straight away, and then everything's being tied into our eventually into our internal databases, and then hoping for that extra data to be pushed onto our public-facing databases as well. So, for example, our session tagging now features barcodes. So these are some examples of interfaces that you can make within the app. So on the left here we have when I want to query an accession, I've set something up so I can scan a QR code or a data matrix code, type in the accession number. We have X accessions, which I'm not sure how common those are, but if we don't have a year associated with an accession number, it starts off with an X. And then we have a way of tapping in details of unknown plants. And then in the middle, the kind of response that I wanted after typing in an accession number is that the record is brought up from our existing records, and then to say yes or no to it, to say, yep, I want to continue, that's the right accession record that I'm dealing with. Or, for example, on the right-hand side, changing bed codes, having a description of the bed codes as well as the codes themselves, just to help out with memorizing all of these 6-character codes that we have. And as I mentioned earlier, our accession tags, we've now started to laser etch data matrix codes into them. So, being able to scan one of those and get a record pulled up on screen, that was an aim to try out with shortcuts. And so this is the kind of outcome that we never had before. We would go out with a camera, we would take lots of images, and then we'd end up with a folder probably dated for the particular day, and then a load of kind of ascending numbers and nothing named. And this is the kind of output we're getting. So say, for example, delivery of plants, a kind of top view and side view that's already tagged up with the accession number and the name of the plant. So we were nowhere near that before, and often images would be taken, and a few weeks later people would think, well, what on earth is this? We're not really kind of tying the records and the images together. And whilst we grab GPS coordinates, we've got a nice Bluetooth GPS unit, GNSS unit that connects to our iPads, and so we're able to kind of do an inventory and also take a pinpoint location that feeds into our mapping as well. So being able to do all of those in an automated way is fantastic for us. So I'm going to run through building up a plant lookup shortcut. And so this will use Brooklyn Botanic Gardens public-facing plant lookup and come back with a response from our website. So I want to do 3 things. So I've got my accession number up here that I want to look up. I want to take that accession number, ask the user for an accession number, take it, and then append it to the end of a URL. And our website has a, I think it's a PHP script, so that after the question mark at the end, any accession number that's typed into that URL brings up a detailed view page. And so I'm going to cheat a bit. I'm going to ask a user for an accession. I'm going to append that accession number onto this URL, and then I'm going to pop open a web viewer, not jumping into Safari, the web viewer on iOS. I'm just going to pop up something on screen, so it doesn't matter what app you're in. It doesn't change your current app. So the first thing is typing into the top for ask for input. So I've got my ask for input step up on screen, and I'm going to say it's a number because I can ask for a text string, I can ask for a number, a URL, a date, etc. So I'm going to make sure it's set to number. I'm going to add in a question, enter accession number. And then the next step would be, tell it it's a number, and then add in a URL. So I've dragged across my URL action, and you'll notice, just go back, you'll notice that there's no line at the moment joining those two together. So we're going to drop in the URL, and when the keyboard's open, type in the URL or paste it in, and then drag up this kind of variable here, which is the output from the first step. So then you drag that up and drop it in at the end of your URL, and you'll see that the two link themselves up. So the first step is to grab the accession number from the user, and then the next step will be adding it into the end of the URL. And then the third step is to enable a web page view, and that is it. So they're the three steps. And then by tapping the play button up here, you get a view similar to this that will pop up and say enter your accession number. You type in the accession number, tap OK, and then it will take you straight to a web view within the Brooklyn Botanic Garden website and tell you about this accession. So you've jumped a step where you would normally have to get the web browser open, then navigate to, or maybe use a bookmark to take you to the search page, then tap in, then type in the accession number. You've skipped all of that, all of the intermediate steps, and it will work from the widgets view. So if you kind of swipe to the right and get this view open, plant lookup will be there. If you tap on it within the widget view, then it asks you straight away for the accession number. You type in the accession number, and it will jump the view to the web viewer. So it's pretty handy. You don't even need to load an app to begin with. You just swipe over from your home screen, tap in a number directly, and then a web viewer opens. So it saves an awful lot of steps every time you want to look something up. So that would be our kind of simple version of a shortcut. The slightly more advanced shortcut would be to build up a plant inventory. So I included this text in the message that went out advertising this talk, and it was, what if you could do something like input an accession number, input plant condition from a pick list, take a photo, title the photo with your data, take a GPS reading, save it to the cloud, and put everything else into a spreadsheet. So we're going to step through all of these stages, and this is, if you were talking in plain English, you might say, okay, well, these are the steps that we're going to take. So this list below, this flowchart below, is more like what we're actually going to do within the app. And so all of these steps have to be kept separate, because the input from one doesn't automatically get fed to the next stage. So say we take an image and we title it, well, there's no point in trying to pass that image to the GPS step. That just wouldn't work. It wouldn't accept that. It wouldn't draw the line between those actions. So it's going to be 5 actions. So the first, the second, the third, fourth, and fifth. And so what we're going to have to do is we are going to, I'll make this bigger on screen. We're going to ask for the input, and then we're going to store it temporarily. And then we're going to ask for the status, and we'll store that status temporarily. And then we'll take the photo and save it. We'll get a location and then save it temporarily. And then we'll join all of the other variables up, put it into text, and then drop it into a file. So I've got a new shortcut here. I'm going to name it this time. So by tapping up at the top on the details, I can set things like the name and the icon. So we can give it a new icon. So I'm going to give it the tree and green. So name plant inventory. And we're going to concentrate now on that first step. So we're going to ask the user for input, and then we're going to save it temporarily. So I've started to type in ask up in the top here, and you'll see that the palette has changed. Then we can drag across from ask for input and drop it into the stack of actions. If you ever need to know what an input is expecting, what an action will do, tap on its icon in the left corner there, top left corner, then it will tell you what it expects and what it will give out. So now that I put something that's expecting some text, you'll see that the palette changes into that context. So as before, I'm going to give it a question, ask for an accession number of type number. Now I need to store it, and we store things. The computer store term for storing something is to create a variable, and you can just think of this as a container that has a name, and you can drop whatever you want to into that container, and if you refer to it by its name, you can kind of call it back in the future. So I'm going to create a variable with set variable. We can give it a name, and I'm going to call it ACC num for accession number. And now we can concentrate on the next step, which is we want to have a pick list that we can choose for the status of the plant. So I've dragged in a list action, and you can see that as default, it has a couple of bits of content, 1, 2. You can tap those to edit the text. And I've called them live or dead. So that's my list. And then I'm going to allow the user to choose from that list. So there's an action called choose from list. And because our plant can only be live or dead, I've got select multiple off. And then, as before, I've added in a variable, and I'm calling this variable that will remember those details, and it's going to remember status. Now I'm into the image capture part of the shortcut. And so I've dragged in the block called take photo. And so, yes, we want a preview to pop up. We don't want it to just blindly take a photo. We want one photo taken, and we want to use the back-facing camera on the phone. And then we can set the name of the image as the next step. Now, we could just type in a title that we want the image saved as. But that would actually mean that every time we ran this shortcut, it would be called the same thing. So we'd end up with a whole load of images titled the same, probably with a number, ascending number afterwards, because we'd have so many duplicate files named the same thing. So what we're going to do is drag our accession number variable, and we're going to use that accession number variable as the input for the image title. And so when we're prompted, when the script first runs, we're prompted for that accession number. And so the accession number that we were prompted for gets set as the image name. So that's the accession number in there. We can type other things in there as well. We could put a space, we could put a hyphen if we wanted. And some of the variables are always there, like the content of the clipboard or the current date and time, for example. So those can be dragged up too. I'm going to set the date format as the ISO date standard that's year, month, and day, so that they can be sorted nicely on a computer. And a variable, our variable for the status of the plant as well as the final step. So that the image will be titled the accession number space, date, month, year, month, and date space, and then the status. And then the last part of this step is to save it to the cloud. So it will be saved locally on the device and then uploaded as soon as you have an internet connection. So instead of asking where to save that, we want to automate things as much as possible. So I've created a folder, Tech Tuesday, within the shortcuts folder on my iCloud drive, and the image will just be dropped in there with no step necessary from me. It would just be automatic. Okay, so now we're on the grabbing location, the GNSS or GPS location. And this is made very easy in shortcuts. There's just a block called action block called get current location. It actually records quite a few things at the same time, and we'll see that later on. And then we want to store that as before, set a variable, and we're going to call this locat for the location. So now we're on our final stretch, and that is to create the text that we want to save into a spreadsheet file. So we add in a text box, and it's expecting some text. So we could type something in there, or we could use our variables that we have to create a line of text. So when we tap onto that box to add in the text, what we want to do is we want to drag in our variables that we've been capturing as we go along. And we also want to separate them with a symbol. So we end up with a something like a comma separated value document, so that we can open that in a spreadsheet program like one of the open suites like LibreOffice or Microsoft Office suite. So we're going to drag in the accession number. Then I prefer to use the pipe symbol, so the upright line that you have on your keyboard somewhere. And the reason I like doing that is because some of the text we may be capturing may include a comma. So for example, some plant cultivar names might have a comma in them, and that would kind of mess up the comma separation. And the computer would get confused as to where the break between each of these fields are. So I tend to use something like a tab or a pipe symbol. So I'm putting the accession number, then a pipe, the status, pipe, current date, the name of the saved image file. And then when you drag some variables in there, you'll see that it will pop up with a second screen just saying, what aspect of this variable do you want to capture of the file name? And so with the location one, as I mentioned earlier, it captures a few things. So you could add the address that you captured that image at, or the latitude and longitude. So we're more interested in lat/lon. So I'm going to say for the first one, take one of those values, and you'll see that Shortcuts kind of puts a little separator and says, this is the locat variable and its latitude, and the next one is its longitude. And then I want to save that to a file. So again, it's going into the iCloud drive, into my Tech Tuesday folder. I'm going to call it data.txt. And one limitation is it will only let you add into text files, but that's no problem. You know, typically you'd have something that would be maybe data.csv, but in this case, call it .txt, and it will allow you to append new records as a new line at the end of the file. So now when we run our plant inventory shortcut, we get asked for the accession number. We get a pop-up that says, is the plant live or dead? Of which we can only choose one option. Then the camera viewer will, the viewfinder will pop up. We can snap a photo. So I'm using the public label of this plant rather than plant itself. And I can say use photo. So it gives me a chance to kind of retake the image if I want to. Then it will save files pretty much straight away into the Shortcuts iCloud folder. And the image has already been named with the date. And if I run the script a few times, you'll see that a few accessions and their images will pop up. And you'll see that it's created the data.txt folder, and it's adding in, this is a preview of it, it's adding in these pipe separated lines of text as we go. So I'm capturing the accession number, the status, the date, those repeated again for the file name of the image, and then lat/lon for our coordinates. Now, if I was to drag that, even as a TXT file, if I drag it into, this is LibreOffice, but you can do the same with Excel, drag it in, and it will say, is it tab separated? Is it comma separated? Well, it's neither of those, so you can choose other. You can then say the pipe symbol, and you'll see that now it understands where our fields begin and end. I OK that, and then I've got my captured data filling in into this viewed as a spreadsheet. And equally, here are this is the data file dropped in with the coordinates then laid over a map. So quickly, just a few things to mention about once you've made something, how do you kind of use it and deploy it? So as I said, they can be run as widgets, share sheets, or added to home screen, and so that relies on someone tapping to kind of start them off. You can save shortcuts like anything else on iOS with a share sheet. So you can say who's close and you can airdrop them to people. And you can upload them online and share links to colleagues or the public. You can do slightly more advanced things, and you can nest one shortcut into another. There is actually an action that runs another shortcut, and when you run it, you can have it hidden in the background. So when you build up more complicated shortcuts, the output from one shortcut can be the input to the next. You can build up incredibly complicated ones, kind of that loop and nest within one another. But the important thing is they can run in the background. So you could actually just have one that would run and let you choose what shortcut you would like to run, and then everything from there on in is kind of hidden in the background. If you ask, if you have your shortcut open in the edit view and you ask Siri to remind you about it, you can choose for that to be a reminder on a routine schedule. So for example, 9 p.m. every evening, it could show you what your tomorrow's meetings are, and then open your alarms program so you can set an alarm for when you need to head into work. You can also associate it with a location, so you can say if I'm within 500 feet of here, then please pop up and remind me about this shortcut. A very advanced way of using it is you can do something called an X callback URL, which basically means if you were to type shortcuts : / then this text and the name of your shortcut into the web browser on your phone, or have it as a link that you click on, then it would run the shortcut. So it's another way of running a shortcut. And there's a thing called import questions, which are incredibly useful when you're sharing with colleagues, and that is to scroll down in the settings view. There's the import questions, and it will ask when the shortcut has been shared with someone, whether you would like some default text already typed in. So for example, I could set a variable based upon the name of the person doing the inventory. And so I could beam it to their iPhone or iPad, and I could say when they first run it, it's going to pop open and ask for some input, and that's going to store their name, and then it's going to add it into a field within the spreadsheet, so that everything they add in to the survey has their name put alongside it. So very briefly, some conclusions. Yeah, what niche is filled by shortcuts? Where there are some surveying apps like Survey123 from Esri or EpiCollect as an open source option. Really, it's you're not tied to particular questions or types of questions. You could do whatever you want. So it's a little bit more technical to set things up, but it's much more flexible. I think it's got better integration with the device, especially the file storage on the device, than some apps or web-based solutions. It doesn't really matter if it's on or offline because it will use the cloud. It's great when it does have cloud sync because you can view the files on your desktop machine later. It's free and there are no logins, whereas if I was using something like Survey123, I'd need to have an S3 login for someone to take part in that. So it's extremely customizable, editable directly on the device. If you don't like something, you can change it in the field. You don't have to be back and forth to an office to kind of improve something. And I find that it's easier than the automation on the Mac. So it's easier to do something first on the iPad and then to tinker with your data afterwards on a Mac, for example. And because it's even before it was bought up by Apple, it had an excellent online community and also very good documentation. Luckily, being acquired didn't really spoil any of that, and it continues to this day. So every version they release, it seems to be getting easier and better. So I would be happy to answer some questions. Thanks very much for watching the main bulk of the talk. Thanks very much.
That is great, Rowan. I think this kind of system has just so much potential. Everything from like field research or the GGI systems or any IT service, actually, because it's so flexible. Do have a few questions that have rolled in.
Okay.
I wanted to pass to you. Someone was asking, Ann Brennan, who is coming from the Temple University, is asking, you mentioned using the GNSS unit connected to an iPad to collect coordinates. Do you have any comments about the ease and accuracy of using that?
Because we're quite an urban site here, if we're anywhere near a road or a path and it's been mapped by Apple, the inbuilt GPS within the iPad or iPhone tends to think, oh, you must be on the road, and it kind of jumps the dot on the map closer to the road. And so we have to get really far away from any path before we get what we know is a real GPS reading rather than a kind of cheat. And then even then it can be quite badly wrong. So we use a survey grade GNSS receiver that's tethered by Bluetooth to the iPad, and then that takes over the internal GPS. That way we get a very accurate reading. We've just moved to a newer device called MLID Reach, and when we're getting the best quality signal, it's like centimeters, so less than 10 centimeters. So typically around a couple of inches, which is way more accurate than you need for a plant. But if we're doing things like irrigation points, then that's the kind of accuracy we'd want for that. But yeah, using an external device, a professional grade receiver is how we do that.
Awesome. So if someone were to just jump into this, it could still work on their phone just with the GPS built in, and you're just saying that using an additional unit really drastically increases the accuracy.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, and especially if you're next to a road, it does kind of cheat and moves the dot over to the road, just because I think the bulk of the time people are using a smartphone, map view. It's because they're navigating somewhere on a road, so it makes it awkward. There's no way of kind of turning off that function.
All right. Another question coming in from Vanessa Handley. She asks, how did you embed the binomials in the photo file names?
Right. Okay. So what I had was, as you can save things onto your iCloud drive, you can do the opposite, and you can grab some text from a file that's already on your iCloud or locally on the files on your iPad. And so I have an output from our plant database, and when you choose the pick list, it basically fills in that text with the taxa, the list of taxa, and then you can scroll through that list. It can be really easy if, for example, with those new plant acquisitions, say there were 50 taxa. Well, it's no hardship to scroll up and down through 50 taxa, but I would think of another way of doing it if it were scrolling through absolutely every plant name listed on your database. But in the case of it being, 50 or so taxa, at the beginning of the day before the deliveries, I knew what plants were expected. I'd already started the accessioning process of those, so I just had a text file, read it in, and created the menu out of that text file.
All right. Great. And then another question here from Lois Moss. You mentioned a little bit about the comparison of other apps and kind of the niche that it fills in. She specifically was asking about her use of Airtable as
Right.
another app. And she was going to explore the shortcuts more. Would you have anything else to say, just kind of in comparison to those other specific options people can use?
Yeah, I mean, really, I haven't used Airtable. I know within the organization we use Airtable, but I wanted something that would just work offline and wouldn't be dependent on kind of having a live data sync. And so that's why I started to kind of mess around with what I've been gradually building up. If an app does everything you need, then that's great. If an app doesn't do everything that you need, or just does one thing that you need, what you can actually do with shortcuts is you can say jump to another app, and then and then jump back again. So with these apps that are becoming more and more compatible and offering actions to shortcuts. So for example, shortcuts has a built-in QR code scanner. But it won't scan a data matrix code. So I have an app called Crafter, and that allows I can call that with a URL. It would jump open to Crafter and start doing a scan automatically. And then when the scan has been accepted, Crafter has an option to then jump back into shortcuts. And so I'm using just one aspect of that app that I couldn't do in any other with any other shortcut action. And I'm jumping from one app to the other, and it's all automatic. So as soon as it scans and recognizes the accession number, it jumps back and then carries on the rest of the shortcut. So as support for this improves, you can start to kind of combine apps, which is another smart thing. So even if your app does 99% of what you need, there's still an option where you could open up a shortcut just to do one step and then send the data from that back into the app you were using.
Excellent. I'm also wondering, it sounds like it's, you're able to combine any number of things on here and really simplify how it works. How has this affected your ability to train, say, volunteers or docents on a project where you're doing data capture in comparison to traditional methods?
It's great because it's flexible. So if something doesn't work for someone, then we can just tweak it then and there in the field. So an example I'll give for that is that I was working with a colleague, and we were in a newly planted area, and I would say, more than 80% of the plant material was accessioned in 2018. And so we would um, type in an accession number. We'd be typing in 2018, then 4 digits after that. And we found that, wouldn't it be easier if it had a pre-inbuilt, so the first 4 digits were already typed in, 2018 was already typed in. So we just changed it in the field and it worked. And so, anytime anyone comes up with a suggestion, you can just try it out. You can duplicate the shortcut, so you can keep your original one, work on a duplicate, tweak it, and then say, does that work any better? And they're like, yeah, that's great. And so, the kind of turnaround time for using something like EpiCollect, for example, we would use it for field work. We would go out, we would record stuff, then we would discuss, what could we do better, and it was reliant on us then back in the office online, making, version 2, and then we would go out into the field, we would trial that, and then, it was a very slow process in making any improvements to it. Whereas with shortcuts, if someone has a suggestion or something that would benefit them working, you can just make the change and there they can try it out. And so that aspect of it has been really good. Another thing that I can recall is, so we had someone capturing the records, and we had someone with the surveyor's pole, the GPS on it. After we captured the location, at first I had to say, okay, that's it, good, thanks. We'd move on to the next plant. But we found that we could just add in an action to play a sound. So as soon as the phone was happy that it had captured the location, it would play a little beeping noise. And then the person with the surveyor's pole would just know immediately, they captured a good location, they could move over towards the next capture. So, that kind of thing, that flexibility allows people to give input on the fly, really.
Great. Again, I can just see a lot of potential for this, and I hope everyone here on the webinar is starting to brainstorm and the wheels are turning on ideas of what we can do with this. Rowan, I hope you can be available on the APGA discussion board as people might follow up on the system. I really like the idea of sharing the shortcuts. So if someone develops something in another garden, that we have a place to share them. So I think the discussion board would be great for that. And if you can be our expert on it, that would
Okay,
be
yep.
a great resource. Have you seen anyone else use it for other purposes or other data collection in general?
General data collection, but I've not seen it used in a garden setting.
Oh, okay. So other museums or have used this, or where did you learn it from in the first place?
I just a kind of habitual tinkerer really with technology. So I think I did the muck around with the the toothbrush timer or whatever comes with like one of the most basic ones, and I just thought, oh, this is quite clever. So yeah, I mean, I've tried various apps to do data capture, and so knowing that there was the ability to kind of almost program on an iPad, that was why I was kind of attracted to it.
Awesome. Well, again, anyone who is interested in kind of following up with this, certainly go to the discussion board, and we'll be there to help facilitate discussion and sharing of these resources. So thanks again, Rowan, for bringing this topic to our webinar series. I think it will be immensely valuable. I'll just
Thank
have
you.
a few other announcements then, just to let people know. Up next, we'll be doing another webinar in the spring, and Mike Parisi of Longwood Gardens will talk about people counter camera technology and how Longwood uses it to analyze traffic flow into and around the garden and plan for capacities in different areas and assist with program planning. So look forward to that. We'll have a specific date for you here before too long. And again, the current pace is to do a winter, spring, and fall webinar, skipping the summer around the conference of APGA. But if you have other ideas, again, please feel free to reach out to Chris Clement on the APGA discussion board or directly. And topics could always start with a discussion or be developed into a webinar presentation. But there are many ways to stay engaged, so certainly feel free to reach out. And with that, I suppose we can conclude. Did you have any other final thoughts, Rowan, as we conclude our webinar?
No, other than just to say thanks for the opportunity to present to the group.
All right. Well, thanks. And again, I'm looking here if anyone has any final questions. I'm looking at the board. I think we're wrapping up, though. So thanks again, everyone, and we'll see you at the next webinar.